All right. Copy.
Unknown caller.
All right. Copy. Okay, so I'm pasting here the link to the YouTube channel where this is being streamed. Can somebody verify that that actually is working? It is? Awesome. Great. My wife gave me as a present this gaming chair. It's very comfy. Still setting it up. All right, before we get started, welcome everyone. Let's see, we're still waiting for some folks to join. Any questions before we get started? Anything at all? Let me share my screen. All right, can everybody see my screen? I assume yes.
Yep.
All right, awesome. All right, so if no questions, then let's get started. We are currently on the third week of this Summer 1 course, and we had just started discussing React.js yesterday. Following the course agenda, indeed we are right on schedule. We had completed the first week just as the intro to the course and some really basic topics such as HTML and CSS, perhaps topics that you were already familiar with. We built, for the assignment, we built a static mock-up or prototype of what we were going to be working throughout the semester. The second week, we introduced JavaScript as the programming language to be able to make dynamic or render dynamically pages based on user interaction and interaction with a remote server. This week, we are focusing on single-page applications and component-based web applications. And we're going to be using React.js as the library that will allow us to discuss on how is it that we can build single-page applications. Yesterday, we got started on the third assignment, which is going to give us a chance to practice on how to use React.js to create component-based single-page applications. So that's where we are. We're going to be spending for the rest of the week doing some of the basic stuff with React.js. We'll be using React.js for the remainder of the semester. And next week, we'll introduce another library called Redux, which is a companion library to React that is going to allow us to maintain state information on the client. And we are going to be maintaining state this week, using the out of the box that React.js provides. And we'll soon find that it is challenging, that it has its limitations. And so that's why we'll introduce Redux next week. After that, on week number 5, we will be working on creating our own server using, going back to our Java application that we built for the first week. And there we'll create RESTful services. Right now you're using my server, the generic server for your assignments. But on the 5th week, you're going to be creating your own server, right? So with your own URLs, endpoints that are going to be providing a mechanism for posting, removing, deleting, updating data in a remote server. So that we'll be learning how to do that on the 5th week. And the 6th week, we'll learn how to make those changes that you're sending over to the server, how to make them, how to store them permanently in a relational database. So yeah, so that's the plan for this for the semester. The last week will mostly be focused on on helping you complete the project and any loose ends or any topics that we might have you might need to complete the final project. Okay, so anyway, so that's the plan for where we are right now, and what's the plan for the upcoming several weeks. Any questions? Anything on the chat? All right, so if there's no questions, let's review where we left off yesterday, and we will continue. So yesterday we introduced the third assignment, and we discussed that we are reusing some of the prototype HTML CSS that we had worked on a couple of weeks ago, and that we had built a static prototype of a course manager, right? That allowed us to just implement the layout, right, and the styling, and also the responsiveness of our static HTML pages, right? And we had built a course list that allowed us to represent courses in a tabular format, right? And it looked something like this, where we had multiple rows, multiple columns, and so we're going to revisit. We're going to reuse this content that we used a while back. We're going to reconstitute it here, but now we're going to wrap it inside a React.js components. Right? We're going to revisit and build it now dynamically. When we looked at it a couple of weeks ago, we did it using just static HTML, static CSS. We're going to use now JavaScript, ES6, the latest version of JavaScript, and we're going to use the React library to make this dynamic component. We're also going to revisit the course editor, and again, we did build this. We built a static version of this, and we're going to revisit this and make it not dynamic, but at least we're going to break it up, right? Because it's a fairly complex screen, right, that has quite a few things going on, right? It has a list of modules on the left side. We have a list of tabs on the top. We have topics on the bottom. So it's a fairly complex screen. So we're going to apply a best practices. And we're going to break out all these elements into subcomponents, right? And we're going to build a larger component in terms of that. All right. Anyway, so this is where we're focusing on this week. Let's see where we left off yesterday. Okay, so yesterday we had started practicing how to work with React.js projects, right? We had built this project CS4500 client React.js. And in there we had looked at the boilerplate implementation of this application. We had talked about that there is a root index page, right? That is it has this root div that React.js is going to inject, is going to dynamically render content into this div that has this particular ID that is then referenced in our source directory inside of our index.js that uses React.js, the React.js library, to instantiate an app, right, implemented here as a JavaScript function, and then injected inside of that div that has that specific div, that specific ID. We take a look at the implementation of app, right, which seems to be kind of like the root, the generic root of our application, and which was implemented just as a simple function that just returns something, returns this whiteboard over here. And so this whiteboard is a component that we built, and we built it using a new syntax that is implemented in the ES6 standard, JavaScript standard, that allows us to implement JavaScript classes, right, using the class syntax, right, that allows us to extend other classes, allows us to import modules that allows it to break out our complex application into smaller pieces, right, and then export so that other folks can import and build, you know, more and more complex applications. So our whiteboard, we started with just a simple H1 that just with the title, and then started thinking about the whiteboard as a root application, and then was built on many different little components. We saw that we'll need a course list component. We might also need a grid component, right? We'll revisit that a little later. And we saw that this new syntax allowed us to very easily mix and match JavaScript, right, for our programmatic and functional programming, but allowed us to also mix and match some static content, such as just with plain old HTML. If we go into course list component, we saw that we started with this top level whiteboard, and then we created this additional component that allowed us to break up the various features, the various elements into smaller and smaller components, right? So for instance, the first one that we explored was the course list, right? And the course list allowed us to render either a table or a grid of courses, right? Each one implemented in their own class, right? So here's our table component. Right now it's just an H3. Whereas our grid component is also just a plain H3. These are just placeholders, right? And it allowed us to explore mechanisms that would allow us to toggle between these two, right? We saw that a component can maintain its own local state, and we can use that local state to decide, you know, what layout we might want to display. Let's see, something in the chat. For the assignment, should we have this whiteboard component, or should we put the course manager directly in the app? Should whiteboard be called whiteboard component? Yeah, whiteboard should be really called whiteboard component. Everything should end with a keyword component. Also, I might have called it a course manager in the assignment. Really, there should be I would call it whiteboard. I think it's a better name. It kind of captures the overall application. Course manager seems to be only specific to the lists of the courses. Whiteboard seems to be a higher level root component that contains a course manager, perhaps. Right? So I would use whiteboard instead of course manager. I'll change it in the assignment. All right, so let's run this, see what this looks like. Oops. So to run this, we can go to the terminal, and we can use the npm start. So npm, as we talked about yesterday, can we just rename app to whiteboard? Yes, you could do that. Sure. Yeah, this app here is somewhat arbitrary. Is usually the standard name that comes with a boilerplate. And it's also a very common name that folks use as the root of the application. Oftentimes is reused to add additional behavior that encompasses the entire application, such as maybe navigation, right, security, and things like that, right? But I mean, you could also, you know, embed all that features inside of whiteboard. So it is a little bit arbitrary how many layers of abstraction you might want to decide to have. But yes, certainly we could have called this whiteboard, and then inside of this have everything else. Sure. All right, so we're going to use npm start to start the application. So notice that npm start kicks off a script that runs our application. There it is. Oops. Let's make that larger and make it a little bigger. Okay. All right, so there we go, right? We have the whiteboard that is implemented by this whiteboard component here. that has the H1. There's the H1, right? And then the course list component is embedding, right, the rest of the application. The course list component is listed here. It's implemented. It's maintaining its own state, right, of what is the layout that we want to display. So state is a variable that it has to be called state, and the component that we're extending, right, is looking for these variables, is looking for these functions, render, right? It's looking for all these hooks, right, that allow the framework to work, right? For instance, render is supposed to return the HTML or the components, the subcomponents that we want to render, and so what is returning here is course list. That's where the course list comes from. So this here down below is the entire course list, which is deciding to either render here, depending on the value of this state variable, right? It's deciding to either render a button and the course table, or if the layout is grid, is deciding to either return a button and the course grid component. See that? And the button, when you click on it, it toggles the layout, right? It toggles from between layout, table, or grid, and that's what used here, right, to toggle and decide what layout we want to display, right? So here, when we click on table or grid, notice that it's a toggling between the two, right? Everybody okay? All right, excellent. All right, so let's keep going. So here, the another information that the course list might want to keep track of is, for instance, maybe the list of courses, right? And that list of courses could then perhaps be shared into the course table component and shared to the course grid component, right? Because both of them are supposed to render the same list of courses. One, render them as table, and the course grid render them as a grid, right? But both of them are supposed to render the same information. It's just that the layout might be different. Okay, so how do we do that? How do we define data and then share it down to other components? Well, the way to do that, right, is that we can declare here the list or the array of courses, right, and then pass them down to the other elements, through attributes, right? As we know, usually when you're using the HTML syntax, the way you configure, the way the behavior of an element is by using attributes. So ideally, we could do something like courses. We would want to pass something down, right, to the courses, right? We pass maybe some array, and we would like to pass it to both, right, the course grid component and the course table component. So let's do that. Let's first declare an array of courses. Right, so in the state, we can define here courses as an array, right? And in here we could put maybe a couple of courses. So let's each course might have several attributes, right? They might have a unique identifier ID. Okay, notice that I am using the underscore ID because I know that at some point, right, we're gonna try and connect this to the database, the generic server, right, that you've been using in the previous assignment. We're going to be using the same generic server that we use for users. We're going to use it over here as well. So I'm already forward designing this, right, in the expectation that this static data, right, is going to eventually be dynamic. I'm going to go. I'm I'm future proofing my code. I know that the IDs are going to have an underscore in front of them. So anyway, so we have an ID 123, maybe a title, the course CS 4550, right? Let's create a couple more courses here. Yeah, so let's give them all unique identifiers. And other courses I've taught, 5610, 5200, 1800. So these are all courses that I've been teaching. So we like to be able to share this information down to other elements. So for instance, this information, right? This any information that I put in this variable can be accessed, right? Either in this component, or this component can share with subcomponents. So for instance, here in the course list, I might want to display here how many courses I have, right? So I could say, this dot state dot courses. Did I say course or courses? No, it's supposed to be plural, courses. Courses dot length. See that? Notice that I used the curly brackets. That the curly brackets allow us to escape, right? To jump between the two technologies, right? Notice that everything outside the curly brackets is just plain static HTML, but anything inside of the curly brackets is dynamic, right? This is a variable, right? That is local. So if we go back to the HTML, notice that indeed is showing 4, right? If I add one more, right? And this is 5, right? This might be 3200. Notice that now it shows 5. See that? So everything is dynamic there. Excellent. But what's more interesting is sharing this information that the course list component has with subcomponents, right? We can share it down. We can say, I'm going to pass you, through an attribute. I'm going to pass you data down to that component. I could say I'm going to pass you this state courses, right? And I can do the same thing with the other component, right? I'm going to pass it down to the grid component, right? There we go. So we have passed it down to the table component and the grid component, right? And notice that nothing has happened. No difference here, right? Nothing has changed. We need those components to actually use the information that has been passed to them. So how can components receive? Because here we're passing it down to the component. The component needs to be able to receive that information, or this courses. So how do we do that? Let's go down to the table component. So the table component is going to receive the information through what we call properties, right? So anything that is being passed through these attributes, right? Using the HTML syntax, right? These are attributes. Anything that is being passed through the attributes is received by the component through what we call properties, right? Properties, and it's a global variable. Well, it's a variable, within the component that is called props. Okay. And it's available through this dot props. Okay, so for instance, here we can receive here this dot props. Okay, props dot, and then props is a map, right? It's a map of all the attributes that you might be passing me, right? Right now you're only passing me one attribute, which is courses, but props contains, it could be many properties, many attributes that you might be passing down to me, right? So one of them is that I'm passing down is courses. So there it is. So I can say this dot props courses because I know that's the attribute that you're passing me, right? And then I know it's an array because I know what I'm passing you, and I can say length here. I know it's an array. So if I go here, right, and I go back to the table, notice that indeed I do have those properties. I know there are 5 elements that you passed me down in the array, right? Notice that course grid is not yet doing anything with that information, right? So we can do the same thing here. Let's copy this, copy that, go back to the course list component, we'll go down to the grid, and let's paste that same information down here. If I go back here now, the grid is also saying that there are 5 courses. If I go to table, notice that they both know that they have 5 elements in an array. Okay, excellent. The table here. Notice the table is receiving a array, right? And it's displaying it here using this using this escape sequence, right? It's referencing the properties and the attributes that are being passed down to it. But let's do something with it, right? One of the things that we'd like to be able to do is render this array that you're passing me. Perhaps as a table, okay? So let's do that. All right, so down below here, we would like to add maybe a table down here. But because it's going to be an additional element, if you remember, return can only return one element, can return one thing. So we're going to have to merge, or we need to wrap this whole thing inside of a div that will be the outer container that will contain all our rest of the content. So let's do that. Let's put an outer div, right? so that we can then add more stuff in here. So what do we want to put in here? Well, we'd like to be able to add maybe a table, right? So we know how to create table. That's easy, right? We can just say table, right? Also, we could just copy the HTML that we worked on about 2 weeks ago, right? When we worked on the prototype for the course list, right? For the for the first assignment, we could copy all that content and just paste it in here. I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to recreate some of that here, just to practice. Right? So we have a table. We have a table head, T head. Okay, and we also had a T body. Okay, so in the T body, if you remember, we also had rows in there, right? So that this might render as a TR. And in the TR, we had several columns. The first one being the title, right? So this might be CS 4550. The second column might have been, I forget. Let's look at the assignment. The second one was the owned by, so it might say me. And maybe also the last time that it was modified. So we'll put maybe 1/1/2020. And the last one was a couple of buttons, right? That might be button, that might be like an edit button and a delete button. Let's see how that renders. Right, so this is the grid. Let's go to the table. There it is. So in our table, right, we have CS4550, me, some date, right, and a button, right. Let's add the head at the top, right. So in the head, we might have another row, right. In that row, we might have a couple of titles, right. So this might be a title. Then we have owner. Right? Oh, if I could type owner, we have th last modify. Okay, and maybe th here a toggle, right? So one maybe a couple buttons, one button to sort, right, and maybe another button to toggle. Okay, so in table, right, there we go. So we have the toggle. So this grid over here, this button grid, really would live down here, grid. That would allow us to, if you click on grid, would allow us to go to the grid view, right? And where in the grid view, there would be a button there that would allow us to go back to the table. We'll connect this a little later, but we have a table, right? So there we have it, right? So now the strategy to make this dynamic, right, to make this dynamic in jQuery was to grab this row here, grab this row as a template, right? We could grab it as a template. We would clone that, right? And once we clone it, we could iterate over the array, right? And then copy paste that template multiple times, right? And just render this over and over, right? So we did that by splitting it into a controller, right? And where we did all the jQuery, and we have the HTML that had the template. Now, to use the JavaScript ES6 embedded inside of the HTML, right? And we'll see that yes, that is what's encouraged. But you'll notice that this table row is already getting somewhat out of hand, right? We have 1, 2, 3, 4 columns, 2 buttons. I mean, this could get fairly complex, right? And if you start embedding here JavaScript, this could get fairly overwhelming, right? So first let's do it. Let's first apply the principle of embedding JavaScript inside of HTML and vice versa. Right, but then we'll have to address the fact that some of this code is going to get a little hairy. Okay, that it's going to be somewhat complex and might get out of hand fairly quickly. So first, let's look at the challenge, right? So we want to dynamically render this multiple times. We want to use this as a template. Yes. All right. Any questions here? So let's first deal with embedding the code right here and then. Right. So what we're going to do here is that we are going to use this as a template. Okay. And we want to copy and paste this multiple times. So how do we do that? Well, to be able to render this multiple times, we need code, right, to iterate over the content. So we're going to embed here some double curly brackets, right? So in this double curly bracket is where we want to iterate over the items, right? And as we iterate them, we want to use each object, right, to then populate this information, right? So we only have the title. We should also have the owner and the date. I don't believe we had that. So let me add here for each one of the courses. Let's add some more information, right? Owner, right? So me, and let's add a couple owners to each one of these. So copy paste. So me, myself, and I, you, and them. Okay. Also the last modified. If I could spell. So this might be 1/1/2020. I'm just going to copy this information multiple times. So this might be information that might be stored in the database, right? And we are receiving this information. And so let's put just some bogus dates here. There we go. So that information is being passed down to us through where? Through the properties, right? Through this props courses. See that? That's being passed down to us, right? So we want to iterate over that. So how do we do that? Well, we could put it inside of a for loop, right? And as we're iterating, right, we want to do something with it. So let's do that. So let's grab this.props.courses. Why do we want to do that? We want to iterate over it. And as we iterate, we want to copy paste content, right? We want to return multiple content. So how do we do that? So to do that, we're going to use the function map. Right? So map is a function. It's a JavaScript function that is going to iterate over the array, right? And as it iterates, is going to pass here in the function, right? It calls an anonymous function, whatever function you give it, and it passes you each of the items, right? Comma, the index, right? The index of the element that you're looking at, right? So it would be, as you're iterating, we know that each object is basically the course. Yes? And also the index. Okay? Also, it's using the passing you an index. Okay. All right. So once we do that, what do we do? What we're going to do here is that we're going to, as we're iterating, what do we want to do with the course? Well, we want to basically copy and paste this over here. We want to return this. We want to return this, and what map does, as map iterates, right? Whatever the function inside, whatever it returns, right? It concatenates, right? It accumulates everything that this function returns. Everything that this function returns. And so, for instance, let's return the index. How's that? Let's do that. Let's here it the table. This is 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. Those are all the indices, right? That have been concatenated, that have been accumulated into a string, right? And it comes out to be 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. We could return maybe course the title. Okay, let's go to the table. There it is. Notice that we have all the titles of each one of the courses is being concatenated, right? And that's what's being returned, right? So let's do something more interesting. This is what we want to return. This right here. So let's grab that. Let's grab that as a template, okay? And instead of returning this static text over here, we're going to do a parentheses, and we're going to return that. There we go. See that? Now let's go back. Let's go to a table. There we go. See that? It is iterating over that array. And as it iterates, it's returning this static content. See that? It's returning that static content. Right? It's always returning the same thing. But we want to be a little more interesting here. We don't really want to use always CS 4500, 4550, right? It's not always me. It's not always the same date. All that information is inside the course, right? That is being passed to us as we iterate. So let's grab that. So we can replace this, right? Again, with an expression, right? Again, this is using JSX. JSX allows us to go in and out, right? Inside of HTML, inside of JavaScript, HTML, JavaScript. It allows us to seamlessly, right? Mix and match this content. So we're going to replace this with a curly bracket. Yes. And instead of having this hard-coded CS 4550, we're going to replace it with the course, that variable course here, right? Dot the title. See that? And I can do the same thing with all of these, right? So this would be instead course the owner, okay, and this would be the course modified. There we go. All right, so let's go back. Let's go back to the table. There you have it. Notice that the content now is dynamic, right? Notice the titles are all different. The owners are what are the data that was in that array. Notice the last modified, the dates change several amongst all of them. That makes sense? All right, any questions so far? Everybody still with me? All right.
Professor, question?
Yeah. Yes.
So when it comes to loading up our web app so far, like in converting it into this language, into this new format, how do you do that efficiently?
So what I would do is I would copy the HTML that you already have for the first assignment and paste it inside of your return, right? So inside of your return, paste the whatever you want to return, right? In your case, primarily will be only the table part, right? Because this is the course table component, right? So only the bottom part of the table, the top part that contains the hamburger, that contains the input field, that contains the buttons, that contains several things, right? That probably can stay in the course list. The course list can contain everything that is common to both, right? The course table component and to the course grid component. But the course table component can focus on just rendering the table down below, right? And the course grid can focus on only rendering the same information, but in a grid layout, right? But everything that is common to both of them, right? Which is the title at the top, the header that is stuck at the fixed at the top of the page, the hamburger, the input field, the add button, and things like that. All of that could stay up here in the course list component. Okay. All right. Okay, so let's see what we got so far. So we have this course list rendering a course table and a grid representation, right? And so and we're able to toggle between the two. And notice that the course table is iterating over an array. And the way it's doing that is over the courses that are passed down to us, right, using the map function, and map is basically concatenating all the courses and returning them. Okay. All right. So let's notice that here we're using the old style ES5, right, using function. And I had promised that we would never use that ever again. But I just wanted to show you. I wanted to show you a little bit of how how the syntax from ES5 and ES6, how different they are. Okay. So one of the first things is that we're going to first remove the function keyword, right? And instead, we're going to replace it with the arrow here. Okay, we're going to change it to that arrow. Everything okay? And if I go back, notice that it still renders the same. It runs the same way, right? So this new syntax is equivalent, right, of using function and using the arrow over here. Okay, so that's one of the first things. The other thing is that the notice the index here is not needed, right? It's it's a variable, it's parameter that is being passed, but I don't need it, right? So I could remove that. Now, because I can remove that, notice that I'm only left with the course parameter, right? The single course parameter. So the ES syntax allows us to be even more terse, right? Even more compact, right? So if the function is only being called with a single parameter, right? So the parentheses is not needed. The parentheses are optional. I don't need the parentheses there, right? Again, one of the main goals of the ES6 language was to become more and more compact, as abbreviated as possible, right? To kind of get out of the way of as we develop, right? So less keystrokes and make our productivity higher, right? Okay, that's another thing, right? The other thing here is that notice this return over here. See this return? This return is returning one single thing. It's returning this TR, right? It's returning that one single TR. See that? And when a function, right? If a function in ES6, if a function only returns a single thing, that's all it does, right? It returns that. It doesn't have any computations. It doesn't have any local variables. It's not doing any arithmetics. It doesn't have any if statements. It doesn't have anything. It's just returning something. Okay. Then the return itself, and the curly brackets, those are optional as well. Okay. So let's do that. I'm going to remove here the return and the curly brackets. I'm also going to have to remove the parentheses and the curly bracket down here as well. All right, so let's do that. I'm going to remove that. Okay. And I'm going to remove this here. That. Okay, and notice that this parentheses now closes with this map over here. See that? Right. So that parentheses probably can be in a different line, something like that. Okay, see that? So now this function is just returning this TR. This function just evaluates. This says that this function just evaluates to just this TR. See that? So let's go back here. If I go to table, notice that I get the same exact results. That makes sense? All right. Again, I just wanted to point out, the changes in the syntax. How dramatically have they changed, right? Again, with the intent of making the language much more terse, right? Much more easier to read. Notice that I didn't really need the function. I didn't need the extra curly brackets, the extra keyword function, return, the parentheses. All that goes away, right? Again, only if in these particular cases. Now, this case is so common that the language really shines, using React.js. All right. Any questions? Okay. All right. So here we have we're rendering this this course and we're iterating over it. Now, if you look at the if you inspect here, you'll notice that we're getting an error. There it is. See that this error? Let's put this on the right-hand side. Right, and that error, we go to the console, is complaining, saying that the loop, that we're iterating over, right? As we're iterating, we're generating all these elements, right? We're generating all these elements brand new, and it's unique, saying that all these elements that I'm generating on the fly, right? The top level elements should always have a key, a unique identifier key, right? And so what do I have here that could uniquely identify TR, right? This table row. Well, I know that the course has an identifier, an ID, right? I could use that to uniquely identify this, right? So if I go back and when it renders, notice that we no longer have that error message. The reason it was giving you that error message, the reason is that it was insisting on us uniquely identifying our elements is that React.js tries to do some optimization when it renders all this content dynamically into the DOM, right? What it does is that it keeps track of all the elements that it generates, right? It says that I generated that TR. It's not static content like over here. All this over here is static, right? I didn't, React.js didn't dynamically generate this. These are elements that were there already. Whereas this, right, it needs to be able to know, it says, ooh, they all look the same. They all look identical to each other. Maybe the content's a little bit different, but the layout is the same. I need to know, which ones map to the data, right? So I need to know that if ever this array changes because you're adding a new element or removing an old element, I need to know that I need to update this array, right? So to be able to know which elements map to what pieces of information, right? It's asking us to uniquely identify these pieces of data. So always, make sure to put the key in there. Okay. Everybody still with me? All right. Okay. Something in the chat. Does the order of the parameter for the function matter? Yes, it has. The order does matter. It has to be. You first get the object that is being passed, comma, and then the index. So in that order. Yep. All right. So here we have we're iterating over an array of courses, right? And for each course, we are generating this piece of content over here, right? Now this over here is fairly simple. It's still just a single row, and this row has several columns, right? And I guess it's small enough that it would be safe to leave it here, okay? But what I want to demonstrate to you is that this could get out of hand, right? This component that we are dynamically generating, it could be a fairly complex set of HTML, okay? And so even though React promotes and encourages us to embed JavaScript inside together with HTML, it also encourages us to, at any opportunity that we have to abstract content, right, to always do it, right? So for instance, this table row could be considered a component on itself, right? As opposed to having all these table rows and data and whatnot, we could create an abstraction layer, right? That its responsibility is to render a single row, right? Plus any of the behaviors of editing and deleting and all that, right? Could go into an additional row, right? An additional component. Also because if you remember, this could start very, very complex, right? Because remember, if we click on the edit button, we need to be able to replace the title, we need to be able to replace it with an input field. Remember that, right? We also need to be able to toggle the buttons between two types of buttons, right? If you remember in the assignment, right, we are asked that these render as like this, right? When when you click on it, right? Notice that it has three ways of rendering: the unhighlighted, right, which we only render the title, me, and whatnot, right? When you click on it, we need to be able to render the background different color. We need to show the buttons, right? We need to show the buttons, okay? And then when we click on the edit button, we need to now render the title. We need to be able to swap the title with an input field, right? And then swap these two buttons. We need to change it with an OK button. See that? So that row, this single row, more complex, right? With fields and swapping buttons and all that, right? React.js certainly encourages us to embed HTML with JavaScript, but also it encourages us to, whenever things are getting out of hand, right, go ahead and create a separate component that can embed all that behavior underneath. So let's do that. Let's move this into its own set of components. Yes? All right. Okay, so let's create here. In the component, we'll create a course row component, right? So let's create in our separate JavaScript, we'll call it course row component, right? And it'll be, this will be, import React from React. And we'll do a an export in default class. And this is course row component. Extends component React component. Okay, and what are we going to return? We're going to render. We're going to return. What are we returning? We're returning this whole thing. We are returning this whole thing. See that? Okay, so I'm going to copy that and I'm going to paste it in here. All right. Now, notice that it's complaining about a couple things. Yes, it's complaining about I don't have the variable course, right? Where is that course? Well, that course is up here, right? It's right here in the map, right? So somehow, right, what I'd like to be able to do is replace this whole thing with this new course row component. Yes, but I need to be able to pass from up here. I need to be able to pass the course down, right, as a parameter. Right? So let's do that. Right? So this is going to be passed down. That means that on this end of the course row, I'm going to receive it as a property, right? So this will be something like this dot props. Oops. This dot props dot course. So it's a property that is going to be passed down to us, right? So it's a parameter, right, that is being passed down to us, right? So now that we have that, here we can now replace this whole thing. We can replace this with our brand new component, which is called course row component. Notice our IDE is smart enough to identify and find the components that are called, you know, and do auto completion, which is great. So course row component, there it is. And we're going to close this. Also notice that it's smart enough to import it automatically for us, which is pretty cool. Right? This is if you're using IntelliJ. And now we have to pass also the course, right? We need to pass the course down to the course row component, which would say course equal course. There we go. We're passing down the course. So that's the attribute, the property that the row component is expecting, right, by name course, and that's the value that's over here. Right? Let's now go back and re-render. Let's go to a table. Notice that indeed it's rendering just the same as before. Notice that it's rendering just fine. Notice that the complaint is back with a complaint about the key, that we forgot the key. Right? Notice that indeed it's correct. Right? The course row component is not. It doesn't have a key property attribute. So let's add it there. So key course dot underscore ID. Right, and this is notice that it's kind of like spilling over the screen. So I'm going to put these in separate lines. All right, there we go. Let's go to the table, and we are rendering the rows down below, and there is no error on the console. Everybody good? Everybody still with me? Any questions?
Professor?
Yes.
I just wanted to ask, are you going to upload this to like a separate repo on your GitHub?
Yes, certainly. I'll post this in a repo, and you'll have two repos now. You'll have the Java repo, which we're going to be using a little later in the semester, and you'll have this new React repo. Yep, and you're free to use any, all, or nothing from here.
Okay, and then for the assignment, we're only doing the course rows. We're only doing like the list of, or the course description kind of thing.
So for the assignment, I'm building for you the grid, right? I'm sorry, the table, but you need to implement also the course grid, which is fairly the same thing, but instead of being laid out as a table, you'll lay it out as a grid. And for the grid, right, if you go to Bootstrap, and you search documentation, you search for what is it called? Cards. You look for cards, right? there's a couple of really nice examples of creating these rectangular cards, right, with buttons at the bottom, some text, some image above it, right, and you can style them all, in different ways. Maybe just a couple buttons, links at the bottom, some images but no buttons. You can put lists under there. You can you can take up the entire screen. Or you can spread them out and have 2 cards or 3 or 4, right? You can lay them out in different ways. So I encourage you to use cards. I'll get you started. Just an example of how you would go about that. But certainly, you're welcome to use these cards. You can also style them with where are they? With different colors, like blue, yellow, blue, red, whatnot. You can have borders around them, which looks nice with a header at the top. So I encourage you to take a look at the Bootstrap cards to implement the grid layout for the assignment. Okay, let's see, where are we? All right, so here we have a course table that we are using to iterate over an array of courses and display the titles, the owners, last modify, and whatnot. Okay, so let's take a look at how is it that we go about on perhaps deleting an element or creating a new element or editing an existing element. So let's take a look at that. How would we do that? Okay. All right, so let's work on a couple things here. Let's work on maybe creating a new elements. Okay, so where do we put that? Well, let's see. Where would we put that? Let's see. So we have here the course list and we have the grid. Right, both of them presumably are rendering the same piece of information, the same array. They're both looking at the same state information. The array might change over time. So we need a mechanism that is common to both, right? That when we click on the add button, right, the array, the new element might be added to the array, right? And then both components need to be notified that this array has changed and that it needs to be re-updated. Yes. So let's do that. So let's add here an input field. Let's add an input field, right? And maybe a button that we can use to add a new course. So let's do that. All right. So I'm going to put it in the course list, right? Because the course list, if you remember, the course list is maintaining both elements, right? It's maintaining the course table and it's maintaining the course grid, right? I'm going to set the default here to be table because we're working mostly on the table side. Okay, and we're going to add here an input field that is common to both. Right, so here's the table component, and here is the grid component. So right above it, right here, I'm going to add an input field. Okay, so there it is. There's my input field, and maybe we can put a placeholder that says a course title. Right, so just give us a hint on what are we supposed to type in there. And we also are going to maybe have a button down below, right, that says add course, right? So we might type the title and then click on the add course. And what we'd like to be able to happen is that course will be added to the array. Yes. All right. So how do we do that? How do we do that? Be able to see if click on the button and handle that event. Actually, we learned how to do that yesterday. We saw that we can do on click and put an event handler on that button, right, and respond to it, right. So presumably there might be a function called function, right, add course with a course with a title of the course, right. Again, this is the old syntax, right? We're no longer going to use the old syntax, right? Instead, we no longer use a function. We're going to instead use this is equal, and then the arrow operator. There we go. Okay, and we're going to say, just to check to see if it works, we're going to say add course and the title. Okay. And here, let's tie this button to that add course. Let's see if that works. We can say on click, we're going to call add course. Or sorry, this.add course. All right. Let's see if this works. Let me put this in separate lines so it's easier to read. So if I click on add course, notice that indeed the alert comes up, and it doesn't know what to show for the title because there's nothing for the title, right? Okay, but the button works. The button works. Okay. Now, what if I want to pass? Notice that the add course is expecting a parameter. Yes. So I could pass a parameter right here. I can say new course. Okay. Now, careful. What this is gonna do, right? The if I go to this over here, notice that it kind of like the alert has been called. Notice that it's being, and if I refresh, notice that that function is being called immediately. I didn't click on it. What's going on, right? So what's happening here is that here, right, this function is indeed being called immediately when the button is being created. When the button is being added to the DOM, is being instantiated and added to the DOM of the browser, this function, notice that this indeed is a function call. We don't want to do that, right? We want to instead, right, postpone that invocation to some later time. Yes. So what we're going to do, to be able to achieve that, we need to wrap this inside what it's called a closure. Right? A closure is basically an anonymous function, right? That has a body that will eventually be called at some point, right? And so to do that, we notice that this is a function, right? That is the function with a parameter, right? And so we're going to wrap this inside of an anonymous function. That's the new syntax, right? That's the new syntax of a function, right? That has no parameters. And has the arrow, and notice that we're not even using the curly brackets because this is the only thing that this function is going to do, is going to make this invocation of this.add course. It's not going to do any local variables. It's not going to have any computation, any if statements, for loops, right? It's only doing this one thing. That's why we don't need the curly brackets, right? We don't need the curly brackets. We could add the curly brackets here. But there's no need for the curly brackets. So this is something that is very common syntax. So we will have a chance to practice quite often. Now, if I go back and I refresh, I notice that the alert is not popping up all the time. Only when I click on add course, notice that indeed it calls the add course function and the string that I pass as an argument, right? The new course. See that? All right, so this is now behaving as intended. Everybody okay? All right, so we'll come back to the add course in a minute. Okay, what about this input field? So this input field, right, we need to be able to somehow read the content of that input field, right? As I type, I need to be able to, somehow read the new title for the course, and I want to use that title later on in my button. So how do I do that? Well, in React, the way you bind input fields to the JavaScript side, right, is that we need to tie the state information that is inside of that input field. We need to tie it to our input field. We need to update the current value of that input field in a local state, okay, variable, and so that we can store every single character that we're typing, right? Also, the value of what is going to be displayed here needs to be that state variable. So, for instance, somewhere we need to have a state variable. We're going to have something like course title, or something like new course title. Okay, that initially is going to be maybe new title. Right? It's going to have some hard-coded value of new title, which we can then overwrite. Right? So once I have that in the state, I can give my input field. I can give my input field that the value, right, of that input field. I could hard-code it. Some title, right? Notice that there it is. See the sum title, right? It's this title over here, and I can override it. Actually, no, I can't. Notice that I can't type anymore. Okay, what's happening here is that the input field, it says that the value is hard-coded to be some title, and I can't overwrite it. Okay, this is JavaScript, right? It's taking over my input field, right? And it's hard-coding that value. I need to be able to change it over time, right? I can either hard-code it over here, or I can tie it and bind it to the state variable that we created earlier. So this dot state dot new course title. There it is. See that? New title is forever tied to this new title state variable. See that? New title. I can change this, right? ABC. If I go back, notice that it changes ABC. But notice that it's tied to all the time. I can't override it. I can't edit it. Right? To edit it, to be able to edit it, I need to be able to dynamically update the state of this variable. Right? So let's do that. How do we do that? Right. So what we're going to do is that as I type every keystroke that I do, I'm going to update that state variable. I'm going to say on change. As the input field changes, okay, it's going to call this function, right? I'm going to say console input changed. Okay, so let's see if I do an input field here. If I inspect and we look at the console. Look at the console here, right? And if I start typing on the keyboard, notice that indeed, right, it says that it has changed. If I click again, right, it's printing again, number 2, it has printed twice. So every time I type, right, notice that it says that it's being changed, but really it's not changing. See that? It has intercepted the keystroke event that I tried to change it, right? But the state is always tied to that input field, to that state variable, new course title. I need to be able to change that. Right? So how can I change it? Well, when all these functions on click and on change, they all accept a variable, a parameter that gets passed to us, and that represents the original event that was used, that was generated when the clicks started, or when the keystroke happened, or when the mouse happened. That event is being passed to us as a parameter to the function, the callback function, and we can print that. We can print that event. Right. So let's do that. Let's type something. There it is. There's our events. See that? The event. We can see what's in here. We have the whole bunch of stuff. We have also timestamps and when it was generated. There's a timestamp there. There's a target. The target is actually, or the current target is pointing. It's a reference to the original elements that generated the event. So we could take we could say event.target. And let's do that. Let's see what happens here. Let's type something. Notice that's an input field. See that? If I hover over it, it's a linkage. It's a reference to the original input where the keystroke happened. See that? Also, it has the current value, the placeholder. But this is a DOM element. This is a low-level JavaScript DOM element that is tied, that is bound that I know has an attribute called value. Right? So if I notice that if I type here, I have new title ABC. Let's type the keystroke Z. There it is. Notice that. Look at that. New title ABC and then Z. See that? So it kind of said that, hey, I know you typed Z, so the new value should be new title ABC Z at the end, right? But notice that it did not change because it's still tied to that variable at the top called new course title or whatever. Notice if I keep typing, notice that it's trying to change it, right, to the new keystroke that I'm typing here, but it's not actually changing. What I need to do is to explicitly change that variable, right, that state variable, so that it has the new value, so that it can then come back here and update the value of my input field. Okay, let's do that. Let's do that, right? What we're going to do here is we're going to take that event. We're going to say, we're going to do this. We're going to say, we know how to change the state, right? The way we know to change the state is using this function right here called set state, right? So we're going to say, this dot set state, there it is, right? That's a function, and it takes as an argument a JSON object. Right? It takes a JSON object of what field, what state variable we want to change. What do we want to change? We want to change new title, new course title. We want its new value to be the value of the input field that we are trying to type. Okay, so let's go back and see if that works. Okay, now if I type, notice that is indeed changing. See that? Now it works the way we expected. And also the backspace works. That makes sense? Okay, so that state variable, actually, that state variable, anywhere it's referenced, it will render. For instance, let's reference it down here, curly bracket, and then this dot state dot new course title. I'm going to put it down below the button. Notice that there it is. See new title ABC. Let's put a break so you can see it better. There it is. See this new title at ABC. I just, I'm referencing that state variable, and I am putting it in line with the rest of the HTML. I'm putting it in, as a sibling to the input field, a sibling of the button, a sibling of the BR, and I'm just, putting static text. Right, but it's not static, right? It's being generated dynamically. It's in the state, right? And I can change it. Notice that as I type, notice that indeed the text is changing. See that? Okay, it changes. See that? And it changes as I backspace, and it changes. So it's dynamic content. Anyway, well, let me remove this. This was a silly example. In the add course now, I can go back and say that add course is not going to be this hard-coded new course string. I could say that the title of the new course is going to be this dot state dot new course title. See that? So if I have this new title ABC and I click on add course, notice that I get add course new title ABC. See that? Or if I type here, I'm now teaching CS 1, 2, 3, 4, add course. Notice that now I have add course CS 1, 2, 3, 4. See that? Excellent. Any questions? Everybody still with me? Right, so I know there was a lot, and we'll revisit this often. We're going to be looking at this, how to work with forms. This was our first foray into how to work with forms, how to work with buttons, right? And how to update state, right? And so you get a lot of chance to practice here in class, but also as part of the assignment, right? You get a lot of chances to play around with forms quite a bit, right? But it's basically always the same thing. You declare, it's basically always the same steps, right? You first declare a state variable, right? And which is going to include whatever form information that you want to update or manage. You'll have the state variable, and you'll have an change that is to update that particular field with the value of whatever's being read from the input field, right? So it's a cycle, right? The input reads from the value. As it changes, it updates the value of that state variable, and the state variable is then used to render the input field. So it's a cycle, right, that allows you to manipulate your input fields. Everybody good? All right, so we'll get a couple of chances to practice this some more. All right, so so here we go. So we have this course. Now what we really want to be able to do is change this, right? We want to update this. We say, change this, and when we click on add course, we want to create a brand new course object with a new title, with a new ID, right? A new last modified, right? Add it to an array, okay? And ideally, this array over here would update and re-render. Right? So let's try and do that next. All right, so here we have an input field that is allows us to type in the title of a new course. And when I click on add course, I would like to be able to add that course down below. Let's see if we could do that. All right, so here we have the course list, and we have the array of courses here. Right, we want to be able to append to this array of courses. We want to append a brand new course. Right, so and we want to do it when we click on the add course button, which right now is being handled by this add course over here, this function right here. Right now we're getting an alert. Okay, so we want to do that, right? We want to build a new course. We're going to build a new course object, which is going to have a initial identifier, an ID. It needs to be a unique identifier. We can create a new identifier doing maybe we'll use the second law of thermodynamics, time progresses forward. So let's create a new date. We can create a new date and we'll use it as a timestamp. Okay, once we create a new date object, we can get the milliseconds, So it's going to give us all the milliseconds from, I don't know, January 1st, 1970. That's a really long number. It's going to be an integer, but we've been using strings as our identifier. So I'm going to cast this long number into a string. To do that, I'm just going to concatenate this with an empty string. Now it's going to be a string. Next, the title is going to be the title parameter that I'm passing. The owner is still going to be me, right? Me, and the modified. This probably could be just new date, date, and I think there was a date string. Date string will convert the new date into a date string. Excellent. And let's print it out. Let's see what it looks like. Console log. We can log this as the new course. Let's see what it looks like. New course. There we go. So let's go back here. Let's look at the inspector. Let's go look at the console, and let's see what it looks like. So there's new title ABC, add course. There it is. There's an object for us, right? So there it is. The ID is 33331. Title is new title ABC. Owner is me, and the modify is Tuesday, May 18, 2020. All right, that looks good to me. Let's add another one. All right, there it is, 908, new title ABC, same date. Looks good to me. Okay, so we would like to be able to add it to this array, this courses array, right? So how do we do that? Well, remember, we always need to use this .set state to update something, right? To update something in the state, right? So how do we do that? Well, here in this state, we were changing the layout, right? We were setting the layout from either grid or table, right? Now changing it was not dependent on its previous state, right? We blindly went from grid to table, and we didn't care what the previous value was. But here in add course, we do, right? We're going to do something like this .set state, okay? And we want to change the courses. The new courses is going to have to be something like the old courses plus this new course. See that? Right? We need to append into the old courses. So here we're updating something that already exists, and it depends on its previous value. Yes. So to do that, set state has two different syntax, right? It has the syntax that we've used here, right? That allows us to change the value of a state variable to something new, and we don't care what the previous value was. We did it here too, right? Here, and when we were doing the on change for the input field, we were changing the new course title. We were just changing it to the new value, right? We didn't care what the previous value was, but here we do. Right? In this one, we care about the previous value because we're just going to append to the previous value. All right. So set state has another syntax that allows us to do just that. The syntax is that it doesn't, the previous syntax it's just that you give it a JSON object and that's it. This syntax instead is a function. It's a function, right? It's a function that needs to return a JSON object. Needs to return a JSON object. Okay. So notice it's a function, right? And here's a curly bracket, and it's going to return a JSON object. Whatever is returned here is what the new state is going to be. All right. And what we need to do here is to update courses to be equal to whatever the old courses was, but appending the new course. Yes. So how do we do that? Well, this function is being passed the previous state. Right. The previous state says this is what the state used to be, right? And you're going to change it. You're going to say that the courses is going to be the previous state dot courses, meaning the new courses is going to be the old courses, but we're going to append, right, the new item. Okay, right? Everybody good? Everybody with me? Right. So we're going to say we could do that here as well. If you prefer, you can do it out here. You can say course new courses is going to be the old courses previous state dot courses dot push these new course, right? The new course. So courses is going to be equal to const. So the courses is going to be the new courses. Okay. All right. Excellent. Let's take a look at this. See if this is going to blow up. All right, so let's refresh and let's do an add course. It died. Okay. Let's see what happens here. Line 23. Let's see, line 23, blah, blah, props, blah, blah, blah. It's not a function, yada, yada, yada. It didn't like that. Let's put a breakpoint and let's see if we can determine what's going on. Let's see if it's the source. Let's put, let's take a look at the content here. Here's our source components, and here's our course list component. There it is. And we can step through this, right? So here's our add course. We're going to put a breakpoint there. Let's call add course. Oops. Wait, what? Add course is being handled by this add course here. Add course is calling add course right here. Is being called from here. Why is it not stopping here? Sometimes the console sources, the breakpoint, sometimes it doesn't quite work. Right, so now it's going to certainly have to stop. Let's try it again. Add course. Okay, now it's stopping at the debugger. And so now we can step through. Let's see. There's the new course. We can hover over it. There's our new course with our ID and the new title and everything. And let's keep going. There's our state. Let's put a breakpoint in there. Continue. Okay. Again, it's not breaking. So let's put a break here. Debugger. Let's try it again. Add course. Continue. All right, now it's in our state. Let's look at the previous state. There's our courses with 5 courses. That makes sense. And new courses. There we go. So let's continue. So new courses is what? New courses. We can look at the local variable. Oh, new courses equals 6. Oh, that's not what we want. We want an array. We want an array. All right, fine. I'm going to use a newer syntax, right? This when you push, the push function, what it returns is not an array. It returns how many elements are in the array. So courses is being set to an integer, and that's not what I want. Okay. So I'm going to use a new syntax. This is a perfect time to introduce the syntax. I'm going to not use this old syntax. The following syntax works as follows. Courses, I want it to be an array, right, which is going to contain the old courses plus the new course. Yes? So how do we do that? So there is a new syntax in JavaScript called a spreader, right, which is 3 dots, right, that allows you to copy over, right, the contents of a previous object or array, right, and it allows you to add before or after, right, new elements, right. So for instance, we can put the new course here at the end. And sometimes the syntax is written better like this, as a separate lines. So course is going to be a new array that contains, first, I'm going to copy over the old array of courses, and I'm going to append at the end, notice the comma here, right? This a new course is going to be at the end of the array. All right, let's see if this blows up. Let's refresh. Let's remove the debugger. Okay. I might need to restart. Let me stop. Let's see. Where do we start it? I think we started in the terminal now. I'm going to stop it. Control C. Restart. Compiling. Is it done? What's going on here? What are you complaining about? Let's see. Let's not change the state. What don't you like about this state? Maybe is it this over here? Let me cancel that. Let me close this. Try it again. Stop. npm start. Okay. Let's try it again and let's uncomment that. Let's see. Okay, it hasn't blown up. Let's try adding a course. All right, notice that now I have 6 courses. See that? I added the course. And notice down below, there it is. See that? New title ABC, me, and today's date. Right? I can change another course here. I can say CS 3200. I can say add course. And notice that Indeed is being added at the bottom. Right? And notice I have 7 courses now. See that? There we have it. Right? So, and then pass this new state information down to elements, right? Components that can then grab that information, pass it down as properties, as attributes, right? And then they render it any which way they want. In this particular case, for the table, is rendering as several rows of courses, each one representing a distinct course. Okay, everybody still with me? Any questions? Let's see. Chat. I think you have to use concat instead of push. Yeah, probably right. Yep, for the new course. That might have worked as well. But nevertheless, I did want to introduce the new syntax. I did wanted to introduce this syntax, the spreader syntax, right? This spreader syntax is going to be very, very useful for us to copy over data and objects and arrays and whatnot. Here, we're using it for copying an array. Later on, we'll use it to copy objects, right? Fields and their values for objects and properties and attributes, which is very, very powerful. Okay. And there'll be plenty of examples that we're going to be using this over and over. All right, so let's work on one more thing. Okay. All right, so notice that you know if we refresh, obviously we go back to the old list of courses. So certainly we're not storing this anywhere, right? We need to be able to tie this to a server and a database and whatnot. We'll do that a little later. But here we're editing a list of courses. We can add elements down below. We can add any number of courses down below. We'd like to be able to delete them, right? Click on delete and remove from the original array. We would like to remove this particular course, right? So how do we do that? So notice that the challenge here, right, is that the data lives where? This array lives way up here in the course list component. Yes? But this delete button, where does that delete button live? Well, the delete button lives inside, you know, way down in the table component. And inside the table component, we have the row component. So the row component has this button over here. See that? So the data is way up, you know, in my parent, in my great parent, right? And so you know, and whereas the actual button lives way down in my children, right, in my descendants. So how do we do that? We need to be able to communicate, you know, across multiple components. How do we do that? Okay. So what we'd like to be able to do here is in the list, right? We need to, you know, just like we had a function that dealt with adding a course, we need to have a function that deletes a course. Okay, you know, you can pass a course, right? We're going to delete the course, right? But we need to be able to call this course from way down there in the button, right? So how do we do that? So here in the course table component, notice that we were passing a reference to a local variable a local state variable that contains our courses. Well, we can pass other things here. We can pass a reference to this function. We can pass a reference to delete course. Right? So let's do that. Let's pass a reference down to the course table component. We can say delete course is going to be this dot delete course. See that? Okay. And then once we're in the course table receives it as a property, just like this dot props dot courses. It receives also this dot props delete course. Yes. What is it going to do with it? Well, it should pass it down to the row. We could say, again, we could do the same thing. Delete course, we can pass down this dot props dot delete course. Okay. Right. And so now in the course row component, this delete button, now we can say that if you do an on click, right, I'm going to call this dot props dot delete course. And this delete course is actually tied. See that? My IDE knows that this, so I can see, we can check to see if it works. We can say alert, right, delete course. See if it works. Right, so let's click on the delete. There it is. See that? It does an alert. So all these delete buttons are now tied to that function way up there, right? And I want to be able to pass information. Maybe I want to pass and print out that I want to pass the course. Right? So here I want to pass something in my delete on click. I want to pass on. So be careful though, right? We're not going to do that, right? This function, if I do that, and if I pass some information here, this is going to be invoked immediately. Right? Notice if I go back and I refresh, notice that the delete button is being called immediately. That's not what I want. I want to call it when, actually notice that it's stuck in an endless loop. See that? Right? So it did it for every single delete button that it was generating, right? It called that that delete function. We don't want to call this immediately. Instead, we want to call it a little later. So we need to wrap it inside of a closure, right? Now it's not gonna, now is we're gonna call it delete me. Now it will only be called when I click on delete. See that? And I can pass information, delete me. See that? Delete me. See that? Perfect. Excellent. Right. But I would like to be able to maybe pass in some information about the course that you passed me down. You know, you passed me a course. I can pass it back to you. I can pass in maybe the title of the course. I can pass you as an argument the title of the course that I want to remove. Right. So now if I click on this, notice that I'm deleting CS 4550. If I click on this one, I'm deleting CS 5610, right, or 5200. See that? So I can't pass information about the course. Perfect. Well, actually, it would be nice if I can pass you maybe the entire course. How's that? I can pass you objects too. I can pass you the course itself. So now if I click on delete, notice that it can't render the object. It's just, you know, some brackets object, right? But I can use that now, right? I can use that object. I can go back to my delete course because I know that this course is now the object itself. I have the object itself. And what I want to be able to do is filter out that course. I want to say, hey, the new courses, the new array of courses is all the courses minus this course, right? So I want to skip over, I want to calculate the new array so that it has all the old courses minus this one course. All right, so let's do that. Right, so what we can do here is that instead of this alert, I can recalculate the new courses and say, and re-update my new courses. I can say this dot set state. I want to update the courses now. Notice, remember, we're updating an old set of courses. So we need to know what the previous set of courses was. So I need the previous state. I need the previous state, which has the old courses. Right, and I'm going to return a JSON object that contains the courses, which is going to be what? Is going to be a filter. I'm going to filter out the old courses. I'm going to skip over this course that I want to remove. So this is, I'm going to say this is the, I'm going to call this course the delete me course. Okay, this is the course that I'm going to remove, or I call it a course to delete. How's that? Course to delete. All right, so what I'm going to do here is I'm going to look at the old courses, so previous state courses. That's the array from the previous, what the courses used to be. And I'm going to filter. I'm going to say filter. Filter is a function that allows you to filter out, right? You say, you need to tell me which ones do I want to keep, right? So we're going to return here. We're going to say, if you return true, I'm going to keep it. If you return false, I'm going to skip over it, right? So filter iterates over the array, and it gives you a each one of the courses, and it's your responsibility to return here. And we're going to return here whether the course that I'm looking at is the same as the course to be deleted. Okay, so if the course, so what this says is that if the course is equal to the course that I want to delete, it's going to return. Okay, so it should be so not equal. So if it's not the course that I want to remove, I want to keep it. But if it is the one that I want to remove, then I want to skip over it. Okay, so let's see if it works. Let's see if this blows up. Let's remove 5200. All right, looks like it worked. 3200, perfect. Now let's add a couple more. There we are. Okay, notice that I can remove these. I can remove this first one. I can remove, and I can add new ones. So I can add, remove. I can update this array. couple more minutes. I'm just going to clean this up a little bit. Let's see. Notice that we are returning only this right here. See that? So I don't really need this return, right? So I'm going to remove it. I don't need the curly brackets either. So I'm just going to remove the return and the curly brackets, right? And the curly brackets right here, right? So that becomes much more compact. Also here, this set state, notice that I don't really need, the only thing that this function, inner function is doing, right, is just returning something. See that? I don't really need the return, right? Since it's the only thing I'm doing, I don't need the curly brackets either. So I'm going to remove the return and the curly brackets. And I don't need this curly bracket right here. I think that's it, right? This closes with this. Let me break it up into separate lines, and this closes with that. This closes with that. Yeah, that looks good. I think that's it. Again, using ES6 is very, very compact, right? I don't even need this parentheses right here. I don't need this parentheses, right? Again, over here, notice that I did not use a parentheses, but it's a function. Let's see if I broke something. Let's delete. Still works, and I can create new ones, and I can remove. Excellent. All right, very good. All right, we ran out of time. I'm going to push this to a new repository and then send a link to everybody so that you can use it, for your own purposes. All right, excellent. Thank you very much. I'll see you in office hours. All right, bye-bye.